Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Happy Sunday to you. Man, is it a gorgeous day outside. Those breezes, blue skies, and hard to believe that we're going to be seeing some big changes over the course of the week. I know a lot of folks have been on social media over the weekend looking at some of the computer models, and different things have been shared here and there. So try to go through all the details and give you all of the different model scenarios, and that way you can give yourself a little bit extra time and make better decisions on how you should be preparing over the course of the week. Nothing to worry about right now. Today's going to be fine. And again, thanks to everybody who's joining me a little bit early. I know I do Let's Talk Tropics usually at noon. Normally I don't do it on Sundays, but the Saints are playing, and I don't give myself a lot of simple pleasures in life, but the Saints game on a Sunday at noon, on a day like this, I'm going to have to sit outside and watch the game today. So we're going a little early, so I really appreciate those of you joining me early on this Sunday morning. So a real quick look at the currents. Temperatures are holding around 81 degrees. Our winds are brisk out of the north at 14, and that dew point has dropped off to 61. So very, very nice out there. Really pretty compared to what we saw yesterday. I know that front really slowly kind of crawled its way on through, but look at the skies we've got out here today as we're looking at plenty of sunshine to go around. And as I said, over the past week, we've had all the rain, and then we had kind of a gray day yesterday, beautiful today, and then we're going to be transitioning probably back to more of a tropical air mass as we go into the next couple of days. And of course, tropical weather is going to be a concern as well. We've been kind of talking about this most of last week with the front that's coming through and low pressure over the Gulf, which we had 90L off of the Texas coast. Still a little bit of a low pressure center there, and then the tropical wave coming in off the Caribbean, and you can see all the convection that's here over the central part of the Gulf of Mexico. So what we're looking at now is disturbance, or invest 91L, which is actually a little bit farther to the south than where that spin was off the Texas coast, but pressures have already been fairly low in the western part of the Gulf of Mexico, and with that front kind of interacting as well, pretty good chance we're going to be seeing a low pressure center getting a closed low and possibly becoming a tropical depression or tropical storm either sometime later today or going into tomorrow. Reconnaissance aircraft are scheduled to go out there a little bit later on this afternoon. So if we're going to get any advisories out of this, most likely they would be coming down probably later this afternoon. I would guess around 4 o'clock or so. A real quick look at the radar. We got nothing going on land, but you can see that there is still some rain associated with our front that's still out in the offshore waters, and that low combined with the front and the tropical weather coming in. We've got some rough seas. That cold front, of course, northerly winds after a cold front, you usually get some rough stuff here off the Louisiana coast. So we've got a small craft advisory that's posted out there. But then you start to get into the front and the low pressure center that's over the western Gulf. So you've got some winds and seas that are getting pretty rough there over the western Gulf. In fact, some of those seas have been running up to 10 feet. A lot of folks are out working on the offshore rigs, and if you're within that area where the frontal boundary went through, you're seeing some rougher seas. But if you're farther out, especially there along the Texas coast, you may be seeing some good 10, 11-foot seas in those far offshore waters. So let's get started with 91L. The coordinates are there on the left, 20.5 north and 94.2 west. And the estimated winds are at about 40 miles per hour with the pressure dropping to 1003. Again, once the recon goes out there and determines whether or not we have a closed center of circulation, if those winds are indeed up around 40 miles per hour, we may go straight from an invest all the way up to a tropical storm. And if it gets a name, it's going to be Francine this time. And forecast models are pretty much in agreement of a northwesterly turn and then starting to turn off toward the northeast. Now, it's all going to be based on a trough that's kind of pushing off the east coast and a ridge of high pressure that's over the Carolinas that would determine where this is going to go, and a little bit more of a weakness perhaps coming up with another trough that's going to be digging along the Canadian border. But compared to some of the computer models that we've watched on this tropical wave as it moved across the Caribbean last week, and how all of the models really had a different solution. What we're looking at here is a lot of agreement. So when you have agreement, even though there are going to be some changes between now and let's say the end of the week, seeing the models in agreement like that gives you a little bit more confidence when it comes to the forecast. And if you look real close on the lines that are on here, you'll see some small numbers, 24, 48, 72, and then going up into the 120. That's 24 hours, 72 hours, 120 hours. So you're talking about days 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you want to look at the timing on this particular graphic here, most of the computer models are bringing something up here toward the northern Gulf Coast in that 96 to 120 hours. So you're talking day 4, 5. So Wednesday going into Thursday, and a lot of the models are looking at that. And there's the ensemble forecast with the GFS. So what ensemble models do is it's basically the same model run, but they give it a little bit of a tweak here and there to see how the model solution would end up coming out if you just added something or subtracted something to it. And then you get a number of different solutions. But when you're looking at the solutions here, they're again kind of like what we looked with our basic hurricane models. A lot of these models are pretty lined up, and that center black line is kind of the average of what you're looking at with all of the different models. And the intensity models, now we talked about this a lot last week. As this storm system, if it does develop and starts moving farther north, there's going to be a lot of wind shear along the northern Gulf Coast. So anything that does try to move northward is really going to struggle for development. But most of the models here are in the agreement that we could see a named storm somewhere in a low-end tropical storm. That's the green. This is tropical storm, anything in that range. So today, going into tomorrow, going into the following day, and then going on into Wednesday and Thursday, most of the models are calling for a tropical storm. One right up here going with a hurricane, and the GFS is also going pretty strong on the deepness of this low pressure system, maybe possibly getting to strong tropical storm, borderline hurricane. So those are mostly the hurricane models. So these are centered on just hurricane forecasting. So I want to look at the global models, and if you watch Let's Talk Tropics, you know how we just go through the different models and just see how they're similar, how they're different, if they're developing something strong or not developing anything at all. And the GFS started to kind of bite onto the icon model, which has been basically showing this scenario now for about 10 days. The GFS model kind of coming into more agreement, but it also has a fairly strong system making its way onto the Louisiana coast. Now, this would be sometime late Wednesday going into early Thursday. And we're going to talk a little more about timing here in just a couple of minutes, but I want to go through with the Euro. And the Euro really wasn't biting a whole lot on the tropical wave as it made its way across parts of the Caribbean Sea. But then once it got into the Bay of Campeche here, it started to pick up on low pressure. Again, very similar to what some of the other models were doing. But the European model still has a closed center of circulation. The system is going to be moving very, very close to where we're talking about, and to South Louisiana, but it's also a little bit weaker compared to what we saw with the GFS. Canadian model kind of bit with the icon model a little bit earlier on last week as the tropical wave was moving off toward the west across the Caribbean. And then once it got into the southern part of the Bay of Campeche, we had some development ideas there. And you can see that the latest model run of the Canadian and the GFS, the Canadian, the icon, these are all brand new. These just came off of the presses. And the icon model, and again, those of you who have been watching over the course of the last week or two, you know that the icon model has been almost desperate to develop something in the Gulf of Mexico for about a week and a half. And what's interesting is several days ago when we were looking at the icon model going out 6 or 7 days, because it was so different from the other three global models, we just kind of were like, the icon's kind of out to lunch. But slowly but surely last week, the icon didn't really change its forecast, but the other three global models kind of started coming into agreement. So then he started thinking, well, maybe the icon is on to something, and it has a fairly strong system making its way onto the northern Gulf Coast, Texas or Louisiana, coming up sometime late Wednesday, and then quickly moving in. Now, I will say that the Icon model is running a little bit faster than some of the other models. So let's quickly take a look at some of the timing here. And this is the GFS model, and we're going with the pressures and the wind. And again, this GFS model is brand new. It just came down. The one previous also had something making a landfall on either the central or southwestern Louisiana coast. The one that ran at 6Z earlier this morning was slightly weaker. This one is considerably stronger, and the GFS, just based on the pressure that it's throwing there, does appear that it might be trying to develop something closer to hurricane strength, and even some of the wind speeds in the offshore waters there are getting really close to that 65 knot wind. And you can see there on the right hand side is the scale. This is talking about the winds in knots. So when you start getting in those white, those pinks up here, you're starting to get up to hurricane strength, and the pressure is forecast to be 956. So that would most likely be a Category 1 hurricane. Again, that is the strongest of all of the other models. So it's kind of on the outside of the envelope. So you don't want to buy into this one just quite yet, because the Euro model, as you can see, even though the direction and the movement and the landfall of this is basically in the same place, 1,000 millibars there, that's not much stronger than what the disturbance is right now. And you can see some of the winds in the knot range there, 32, maybe 35. So that would be a tropical depression or borderline tropical storm. Canadian model is again a little bit stronger, and this is also calling for something early on Thursday, so you can see that up there on the title. This one a little bit stronger, 993 on the pressure. That would probably be a tropical storm. And then looking at the wind speeds, it's in that 40 to 44 knot range, so you're talking about a modest tropical storm. If this were the scenario, this would definitely get a name. And then the Icon model, again, which has been developing something pretty much for the last several days, is very close to the Canadian model when it comes to the pressure as well as the winds, kind of keeping it as a low-end tropical storm. But I will say the Icon has kind of flipped back and forth between minimal hurricane and a tropical depression. It's kind of been going back and forth, but the Icon has really been the only model that has truly kept a tropical system trying to develop there, going on there in the Gulf of Mexico. And trying to look into questions here, a lot going on in the Atlantic. Eastern Pacific is starting to slow down just a little bit there, Travel Jet Setter 954. And a lot of times when you see less activity in the Pacific, you tend to see more activity in the Atlantic. And the last few weeks, we've had almost nothing in the Atlantic. We've had a few storms that fired up over there in the Pacific. So yeah, a lot of going on in the Atlantic, which is what we normally expect during the month of September as we're getting closer to the peak of the hurricane season. And one of the things I'll say, because there were so many predictions about how this was going to be such a busy hurricane season, and honestly, all of the signs pointed, there really wasn't anything that was showing that we were going to have an inhibited hurricane season, that we were at least going to have above normal, if not a very, very busy season. And we've only got 5 under our belt. And even with the conditions that have been out there, we just haven't seen a whole lot of things develop. So at this point, I'm starting to wonder if we should just not even think about it and just kind of expect anything, because it's been such an unusual season. And yes, Tyler, I am going to be talking about wind shear here in just a couple of minutes. Stick with me. Here's the HWRF model. Again, these are hurricane-specific models. Looks like here, very low-end tropical depression, maybe not even a tropical depression, and the HAFS model is a little bit stronger. It's pretty similar to what we're seeing with the Euro, the Canadian, as well as the Icon. So again, the GFS is the stronger one that's out there. The Euro is the weakest, and the Canadian and the Icon are probably right there in the middle. So rainfall is going to be probably the biggest issue when it comes to this, at least based on what I'm looking at right now. I do think there will be some windy conditions, especially if this gets to be a stronger tropical storm, but that tropical storm, those tropical storm winds are going to be pretty much confined to closer to the center of that system. So We're going to watch out for the possibility of some very heavy rains. The GFS model is indicating parts of Acadiana could pick up 8 to 10 inches of rain toward the end of the week, and that's going to be on top of the very heavy rains that we already had during the course of the week last week. So flooding would probably be the biggest threat, and also some coastal flooding. Of course, water temperatures would be able to support anything in the western part of the Gulf of Mexico, and the tropical cyclone heat potential isn't necessarily as high over the western Gulf as it is over parts of the Caribbean. And for those of you who are new to the show, the tropical cyclone heat potential measures 80-degree water at the surface and then how deep that 80-degree water goes. So if a tropical system kind of stalls over an area that has deep 80-degree water, it can continue to churn up that warm water and continue to feed off of that fuel, and sometimes you can get some decent intensification. But there are also things that would inhibit development, and one of the questions in here, it looks like Tyler was talking about the wind shear, and the wind shear right now is very high here along the upper Gulf Coast, and that's basically because of the frontal boundary that came through. But where this system is currently, it is in an area of fairly low wind shear. Now, it's surrounded by some moderate to high wind shear, so it's going to struggle, but it will have a chance for some development there. But let's look at the end of the week. So this is going into Wednesday and Thursday. So you see that we still have a considerable amount of wind shear here along the northern Gulf Coast, but it looks like this is trying to work its way through some kind of a bit of a weakness. So will it be able to do some development? Probably. Is it going to be inhibited by the wind shear? Definitely. So that is the one factor right there where I'm pretty confident that we are not going to have a strong hurricane. This is not going to be a major hurricane. It might not even reach hurricane strength at all because of the wind shear. It really is going to be inhibiting that there. So we'll have to wait and see what's going on there. So real quick, I wanted to take a little tour of everything else that's going on. The Central American Peninsula, okay, some thunderstorms over the southwestern Caribbean, got a tropical wave that's working its way across the western part of the Atlantic. We've got a couple of other tropical waves that are out there. So it does appear that not just the thing in the Gulf of Mexico, which now has a 90% chance for development according to the National Hurricane Center, but those other tropical waves that are in the Atlantic also have a medium chance for development. Right now, it does not appear either one of those will be a threat to the region. I think there's going to be enough energy coming off the East Coast that it should keep those systems out in the middle part of the Atlantic. So just looking real quick, since we do have the potential of a tropical system or at least a lot of rain coming in our direction toward the end of the week, this is the list of things that you can be doing right now. This is the stuff that you should have been doing before hurricane season even started, but just kind of glance at that real quick. If you're missing some of these things, today, tomorrow might be a good chance to get out and get a few of these things, or at least take care of these things. And a lot of this stuff you can just do at home. Make sure you got a basic tool set. Make sure your first aid kit is stocked. Make sure you got enough cleaners and things like that. Again, I don't think this is going to be something that we're really going to have to prepare for, but it's always good to have these things just in case the next one that comes along, because we're far from the end of the hurricane season. But back in May, when those thunderstorms came through, I kind of got caught off guard as well. I didn't have any electricity for a day, and it wasn't the fact that I didn't have the batteries or the flashlights. I just couldn't remember where they were. So now I've got everything kind of in order. And also, because we are a week out, I don't think we're going to have any evacuations. There might be some voluntary evacuations with some coastal flooding along the coast, but I really think most of us will be staying on this one. But this is also a time to go in the backyard, take inventory of what you got, what you might need to move inside, get a full tank of gas. I always try to keep at least a half a tank of gas during hurricane season. And again, we're a week out, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of evacuation, so making reservations probably wouldn't be part of the plan this time around. But it always is a good idea to alert your family or friends who live outside of the area what your plan is. We could still lose some electricity, and because everybody's going to be using the data on their phones a lot more, it might be harder to get in touch with folks that are outside of the storm zone. So it's always good to let them know what you're going to be doing well ahead of anything that's coming in. So today, a beautiful day. Tomorrow, I think, is going to be nice. Maybe a couple of thunderstorms starting to come in the afternoon, and then on Tuesday and Wednesday, if these models hold, we are going to be seeing weather deteriorating, not just in the offshore waters, but also coming onshore. And again, I think our biggest threat right now is going to be coastal flooding as well as flooding rains, because so many of the areas got 5, 6, 7 inches of rain, so the ground is saturated. So if you're going to get an extra 7 or 8 or 9 inches of rain, flooding is probably going to be your biggest threat, and that's what we're going to be watching out for, at least for now. So check with my social media pages. I'm Dave Baker, Acadiana Weather Today, or Dave Baker. A lot of folks have been sending friend requests on that Dave Baker page. That's like my original Facebook page. It already has 5,000 friends. You're not allowed to have any more. So if you can find the other page that's called Dave Baker, Acadiana Weather Today, you could just like that page and you'll see all the same information. So if you've sent me a friend request and I haven't added you to it, that's the reason why. There's about 600 or 700 people that have sent me friend requests, but I can't add it on there because I have a limit. So go to the page Dave Baker, Acadiana Weather Today, and you'll be able to like that page and you'll get all the updates. I update both pages exactly the same. And then on X, I'm Dave Baker TV. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. If you do, please like this video and subscribe to my channel, especially now that we've got something coming around. You can get the updates. Turn on the notifications too. That way, if I get any other information or if I'm going to be breaking in here on YouTube with anything live, you will get the notification. You'll also know when the regular broadcast tomorrow at noon hits. And also, if you're new here, I do a little morning show called Acadiana Weather Today. It's real short, just a quick little forecast, kind of tell you what's going on weather and how it is going to affect your day. I'm meteorologist Dave Baker. Enjoy your Sunday and go Saints.